Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm over here editing this video and I thought that I'll do a voiceover for most of it because there's a lot of action going on and not enough explanation. So I'll start off by saying here I am trying to install 2 outlets in this wall and then patch the hole myself, which I usually never do. And right here I'm finding the middle in between the tabletop and the metal brace that holds the table together. The outlet itself is about, I don't know, I think it was 4 inches. So I'm making the hole in the wall 6 inches. So I have to go 3 inches above the line in the middle and 3 inches below to get those 6 inches. Now this yellow tool that you see here is a magnetic stud finder. So it pretty much finds the screws that are in the 2x4 on the other side of the sheetrock. And I like using this one more than the other stud finders because I'm able to find exactly where a screw is, and I could shoot a line straight up and down where I'm going to be cutting my line to make the hole. And here I'm using the oscillating multi-tool to cut that hole. You don't have to use a oscillating multi-tool to cut the hole. You could use any tool you want, but I like to use the oscillating multi-tool because it makes the least amount of dust. So it is ideal for occupied spaces. Some professional electricians might say I am using way too many brackets to hold the outlets, and they might be right. But I personally like to use 2 brackets because it gives support both on the top and on the bottom of the junction box. If you usually use one, is right in the middle of that one, so it's kind of flimsy on the very top and the very bottom. But as you guys can see here, I'm having a bit of trouble. I had to take the whole box and bracket assembly apart and install one bracket at a time. It's just easier. So if you are going to be using 2 brackets like I am here, I recommend putting in the brackets first and then installing the 2 boxes, because it's hard to get 4 things level. In this box here, I'm going to have 2 20 amp outlets, and that's why I have a 12-3 wire. I slowed this part down because I want to show you guys a trick. I forgot to knock out the hole to get the wire through. So what I do when that happens is I screw in a self-tapping screw, and then I use a pliers to yank that off. In this box, I made a mistake. I am putting a 10-4 wire in this box, and I was going to be running a 40 amp breaker with a 50 amp outlet for 220. And this number 10 wire is not the right size wire. I have to put a number 8, so I'm going to have to run a number 8 wire into this box. But I think I'm going to be leaving the number 10 wire in there, so if in the future someone or me wants to remove the 220 and want to put a 30 amp breaker in there, they have the ability to do that with those number 10 wires. All I can say about cutting this sheetrock is pretty straight up, is measure twice, cut once. And I personally do that. As you can see, I'm taking my time measuring and making sure that I get everything right. I also do one measurement at a time. So I measure the bottom of the box, then make that line, and then the top of the box, and then make that line, so that I don't get those numbers confused.
All right, everyone, check it out. We are officially hooked up. We have all the roughing done for both outlets. Like I said before, this is gonna be a number 10 wire with a 40 amp breaker. for a 220 outlet for a welder. Also this right here, this is going to be for the 220 amp outlets for, you know, yeah, anything that I'm using in this space. On a 20 amp breaker on one outlet, you really can't use a vacuum and a table saw, so that's why I put these two here, and they're very, you know, accessible. But that's not the main focus of this video. The main focus of this video is patching this hole all the way around. This is going to be the first time that I patch a hole in view where people could be able to see it. Usually when I patch a hole is above the ceiling for fire stopping and no one's going to see it. So this time I have to make sure it looks pretty. And what we're going to be using is compound and plaster. You could just use compound, but if you just use compound, this basement is very humid. So if you are going to use only compound, it's going to take very long to like cure and get hard. So I'm going to be mixing it with plaster. You can mix it with both water and plaster, so it could be more smushy and soft and easy to work with. But the first coat, which I'm going to be doing 3, the first coat I'm just going to be doing straight plaster and compound. I'm just going to be mixing it, and you're going to mix it the same way that you mix the fairing compound, the same way that you mix you know, Bondo and epoxy. You just take a little bit of the two and you put it and you mix it. There's no really exact mixture, just the more you use of plaster, the quicker it cures. Also depending on the humidity in the room, but the more you use, the quicker that cures. So keep that in mind. I'm going to be using a 6-inch knife. I have this 4-inch just in case, and I have the 10-inch knife so that I could go across it or this way like this. A nice bigger knife. So like I said, it's gonna be my first time doing this, especially on the channel. I've never done it on the channel. So bear with me and let's see how this goes.
For the second coat, I decided to use both water and plaster, and as you guys can see how I did that, I made a nice circle with the compound, put water in the middle, and then put the plaster on top to cover it all 100%. Let it sit for about 2-3 minutes. The more time you let it sit, the quicker it cures. If you think the compound and plaster is too soft, you know, like too watery, you could just add a little more plaster like you saw me do earlier in that mix, and just make it a little thicker. At this point is when I start panicking, because the way that I am doing it does not compare anything to how the professionals do it. And the way that I calm myself is by convincing myself that I could always sand it and do it all over. It doesn't have to be 3 coats. It could be 6, 7, or 8. Doesn't matter, as long as it comes out good in the end. This was a couple of hours later. Really, it wasn't cured already, it was still wet. So when I was sanding it, it was getting my sandpaper clogged. So what I decided to do is just mix some plaster and compound off camera, and decided just to throw another coat on it, make it thick, since it's already about 8 o'clock at night. The following day, I'll just grab some sandpaper and sand it smooth to the point of where I want it, and then I could do the polish coat. This is the last coat, which is called the polish coat. This is to get all the gouges and scrapes that the sandpaper left. And it'll be ready for paint as soon as this coat dries.
well, there you go. The patch is done. And it looks pretty good. It's nice and flat and smooth. The transition where it's taped and not taped is very smooth. There is a bit of a bump, and let me see if I can catch it with the knife. So check it out. There is pretty flat. You can see a little bit of light coming through in that spot right there. There it's flat. Flat. There's a little light coming through there. But it's good enough for what it is. It's my first patch and I'm happy with how it came out. So like I said earlier in the video, this is gonna be for 20 amp outlets, 2 of them, and this is gonna be for the welder, that's gonna be 220. And I said I was gonna use a number 10 wire, but after a lot of research, I have decided I'm going to go with a number 6 wire with the with this plug. I forget what it's called. NEMA 650R and a 40 amp breaker. I have to buy more wire, obviously, because this is not enough and I need it in the color black and red. But I'm gonna be doing this work anyway off camera. There's no reason to show that. When the welder comes, I'll show you me plugging that in, but I don't know when that's gonna be because the welder is pretty expensive. So all with time. But back to this. This is looking great. All I have to do now is paint it and walk away from it. Really good. I'm glad you guys were able to be a part of this project. My first time not only taping on camera, but also taping somewhere where it could be seen. And I think for my first time, it came out pretty well. Although I've taped before just in places where it doesn't really count, so it doesn't have to be nice. I've never even sanded it before. This is the first time I ever sanded a patch that I made. I'm just gonna finish painting this off camera. No one wants to see somebody painting. You guys get it. Primer, 2 coats of finish, and walk away. So I'll end the video here. If you learned something new, you can show me by giving me a like. Any comments, questions, leave it in the comments down below. And if you're interested in seeing more little projects, consider subscribing. And I hope to see you guys on the next one. Thanks.